He just moved in, you know, next door to me. So I'm always one to meet the neighbors. I went over to the guy, I knocked on the door next door to where I live, and I say to the guy, I said, hey, I'm your new neighbor, you know, and I said, good to see you, you know, welcome to the neighborhood, you know. And so the guy, I said, what do you do for a living there, sir, you know, if you don't mind me asking? So he says to me, he says, I work down at the University of Science there. He says, I'm a professor of logic. Now, what the hell is that? I never heard tell of that. Yeah, well, he says, it's hard to explain. He says, why don't I give you an example? Let me ask you a question. He says, do you own a doghouse? So I go, yes, I do. He says, well, then that means you probably have a dog. I said, yes. He says, well, that means you have a family if you have a dog. I said, yes, I do. He said, well, then that means you got kids, you're married. I said, yes, I am. He says, well, then you're a heterosexual man. I said, yes, sir, I am. He says, well, you see, that's logic there. I asked if simply from finding out you had a doghouse, I made this series of inferences, and I found that you're a heterosexual man simply from the fact that you had a doghouse. I go to get a bus, you know, to the bus stop, and I walk down to the bus stop, and I'm still thinking about this thing that happened to me, you know. One guy lights up a cigarette there, and he goes, as soon as you light up a cigarette, the bus comes. The guy goes, what's new with you? I go, well, I had an interesting thing happen to me today. I said, I met my neighbor. He said he's a professor of logic down at the University of
Science.
Professor of logic. He goes, what the hell is that, logic? I said, well, it's a series of... I said, I can't remember exactly, but I said, I'll give you an example if you want to hear an example. Let me ask you a question. Do you own a doghouse? And the guy goes, no, I don't own a doghouse. So the guy says, oh, yeah, you're one of them gays.